Okay. So greetings from Tokyo, my dear friends. This is Daisuke, and I'm very glad to be here today because I am joined by a really wonderful guest today. This is the one, the only Michelle Kisner.
Oh.
Michelle, hello. Hello, Michelle. How are you doing?
I'm doing fabulous today.
Well, that's fabulous. That's absolutely fabulous, my friend. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us. And I want to say just from the outset that it's a real thrill for me to be able to talk with you like this because we've been friends, but we haven't necessarily had the opportunity to speak face to face like this. And so this is a real honor and privilege for me. So thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. I'm looking forward to it very much.
I appreciate you inviting me on as well because I do watch your interviews with other people and I just love, getting to see how other film fans think and where their philosophies lie. So I'm glad that you thought I was cool enough to come on. So
Oh, no, I have to switch that around on you. I am so fortunate that you would take the time to speak with me. So I am really thrilled. I'm over the moon, and I hope to be able to ask you a number of questions that have been on my mind of late. But I just want to let people know, in case they are watching this and meeting you here for the first time. So, Michelle Kisner, so you are a person we were talking about this off camera a bit, but you are a person who wears many hats, as it were. You have your interests planted in many different fields, or your flag is planted in many different interest fields, which to me is in and of itself really fascinating. Among your many great endeavors, you are a critic, you are a writer, you are a film critic, you are also, speaking of film critics and film reviewers and criticisms and reporting of that nature, you are also, among other things, a certified film critic on Rotten Tomatoes. Is that correct?
Mhm. Yes,
So,
yeah.
and so you are an active film critic and reviewer, as well as many other things. Is that correct?
Yeah, I've been doing it for about 7 years now or so, I'd say. Maybe the last 2 or 3 is when I started getting noticed more and getting into like the actual published realm where I could put my work out there and get enough readership to get like on Rotten Tomatoes and stuff like that. But yeah, it's been a little bit of a journey, working from like just putting my work out there and maybe 2 or 3 people read it, and now like 5 people read it. Or I don't know, but it's more than 2 or 3.
Eh, That is really something else because it's not easy to pursue this and pursue it to the place that you have been able to achieve, which is extraordinary. And so I really must commend you so much for this fantastic trajectory that you achieved and that you are currently on, of course, because you are still an active critic. And
Yes.
could you let us know, for those of us who are being introduced to you for the first time, uh, do you focus in on particular areas of cinema? Do you focus in on, say, recent films more than non-recent films, or do you focus on, say, Blu-ray releases and the like? Could you give us a sense of what your focus is as a film critic and writer these days? I and many other people would really love to know.
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, you can kind of see behind me, like I have a very large physical collection. This is just part of it, but whenever you do like a Zoom, you always got to have your cool stuff in the back. So I set it up this way. But uh, I would say the bulk of my film watching is actually older films. When I first started out, I specified very heavily into horror, underground, B movies, cult films, exploitation films. I collect those. More niche areas where people were afraid to write academically about cult films or B movies because they felt like they're beneath them, or maybe people would judge them harshly, like, oh, you're writing all this stuff about, you know, Evil Dead or something like that, when all these movies are viable and they're pieces of art just as much as art house films, you know. So I felt like there was like a area where I could really enjoy, you know, analyzing these type of films for their themes and stuff. And now I do when I got into Rotten Tomatoes and in the Film Critics Society, you have to have a certain amount of new movies every year to stay within those societies. So I do watch a lot of new releases as well, just because I also love film. So I want to watch new films. I'm not one of those people that I'm like, everything old is better because it's old and everything new is bad because it's new. I find there's gems everywhere. There's old movies that are gems. There's new movies that came out this year that are fabulous. It's a continuous like process, right? Film, you know, it keeps going, and you got to kind of keep up with the trends and stuff too. So, you know, no, I'll give any film a chance. I don't judge films before I see them. So if something's on Netflix sounds fun, I'll try it out on Netflix. You know, I don't feel like looking down on any source of films. If somebody made a film on YouTube and it was good and I watched it and I liked it, well, that's a good movie to me. So, but I mostly focus on older films just because I just like 1970s and 1980s are my favorite decades for film. So I tend to watch a lot of stuff from those decades.
Wow, that's very impressive, my friend. Very impressive. And thank you very much for mentioning the Detroit Film Critics Society. If I neglected to mention that at the outset, I apologize. But you are also a member of the Detroit Film Critics Society, as you refer to. And so that and your certified status with Rotten Tomatoes and other endeavors means that you must, I can assume that your film watching schedule must be quite heavy indeed. Could you give us a sense of, generally speaking, how many films are you watching, say, in a given week?
Wow. It depends because I have I work shift work. I have kind of like a hard job. So on my days off, I'll watch 3 or 4 at a time throughout the day. And I also have what my boyfriend calls the stack, which is just like a stack of Blu-rays I'm trying to get to that's constantly growing on my table in my living room. And he'll always be like, oh, let me move the stack out of the way so we can sit down, because I'll always be like, oh, I'm going to watch that tomorrow. I'm going to watch that. And I'll just keep adding to this like stack on my table. But yeah, I probably watch probably between 4 or 5 films a week, sometimes more if I don't have anything going on days off. And I will say, since the pandemic, that's gone up because there ain't nothing to do on your day off now except for sit at home. So so it's been like actually there's a lot more free time for films, I find, which is good and bad. But you know, it's good to have more free time. It's bad why I have it, but you know, but yeah. And I also get a lot of screeners from studios, both physical media. I also get digital screeners because they want you to review them. So those will start stacking up, and it's a constant juggle of me watching films because of deadlines, and then me also watching films for pleasure, because I don't always want to write about everything I watch. Sometimes I just want to watch something, take it and enjoy it, and that's it. But you know, sometimes that becomes a little harder to do if I have a lot of deadlines that I gotta meet, and it also depends on the time of the year. This usually in a normal film year, this time of year is when all the Oscar screeners and stuff start coming out, and they start just like, I'll get like, you know, honestly like 100 in the mail over a 2-month period of all these studios. Watch our movie so we can, you know, get nominated for stuff, and then it's just madhouse from October to December.
This is very insightful for someone like me who isn't a film critic or a film reviewer. And so this is very interesting to me for a lot of things. You bring up something that I wanted to ask, which was, now I guess it depends on the season, because as you refer to, if you have an award season coming up, then that means that you will essentially be flooded with so many screeners and digital and physical media studios and the like asking you to please watch this film and give us your take on it, etc. So I can imagine that your let's say, a backlog, or your to watch pile must be very filled indeed. Could you give us a general sense of the maybe ratio, if you will, of the films that you watch? What would be the amount of films? What percentage of the films would you say you watch for your critic writing work? And what is the amount of films you say you watch for pleasure and for your own film watching love? What's the breakdown between this percentage and this percentage, would you say?
I would say it's about 60% work movies and 40% pleasure movies. I mean, the interesting thing is, like, I love watching movies, so the work movies, I also like those too. And I do get screeners for things that I'm looking forward to a lot, and I get excited. Now, I'll be like, "Ooh, I wanted to see that anyway." So now it's pleasure and work are the same thing. But yeah, it's like a 60-40 split. And like I said, towards the end of the year, it's like 70-30. It's mostly just me trying to keep up with the screeners and trying to watch them all. The Oscar type screeners, the award screeners, it's less that I have to review them. It's just that the every film critic society, like the Los Angeles one, the Detroit sector, all that, Portland or Oregon, or every state has their own. They watch all the screeners and then they put together their favorites, and then they lift those up and announce them, right? So everybody goes, oh, the New York circle, these were their favorites. So everybody gets hyped up about these movies. So the companies, they want us to see them so that we can vote on them and put them in our press release. And that generates hype for the films, like, because then it could be like, these films are causing a buzz with the critics, they can say that kind of thing. So those, it's not so bad because I just have to watch them and instead of actually writing on them. So it's not as much work. But generally through the year, it's about, like I said, 60-40 of work. And people don't realize when you're a reviewer, to really get noticed and get companies and people to be like, I want this person, because I have people that actually, and I'm not trying to brag, but I do have people that message me, please, Michelle, watch my movie I made. I'm a small, I make indie films or something, and you like this kind of thing. I made a movie that's just like you would like, and they beg me to watch their stuff, they want somebody to write on their films. They want, but they won't want somebody that'll watch it and just write 2 sentences. They want somebody that'll give their film some love, really dig into it, which is what I do. I like doing thematic analysis for films as opposed to like technical stuff, which I do cover a little technical, but they want that kind of like, they want the royal treatment for their films, and I can give that to them. If I, even if I don't like a film, I can still, I still will write up something, and I don't write like mean reviews when they're negative. I'll say I don't like this thing, but I don't, some people try to like go after the people that made it, but there's always good in every movie I can find. At least I think, because people worked on them, so there's some kind of passion there. But it's a lot of work to be a reviewer full-time, and I have a full-time job on top of it, so.
Yeah, I was going to say, this is not the only thing that you do, of course. And so, as you say, you are also, you have full-time employment elsewhere alongside your film critic's work. And as we'll try to get to in this conversation, it's not just films that, of course, you are focusing on, but it's a whole variety of media and entertainment. And so my hat's off to you, my friend, for being able to achieve so much. And it's really I'm incredibly impressed. I have been for a while now, and even now, being able to hear from you directly about this, I'm just so thrilled and impressed by this. And just please keep up the great work that you are doing. And speaking of that, I do want to ask you something that you brought up, which is something I've been curious about, which is what do you, well, first of all, as maybe as a critic, but also as a film enthusiast. Well, actually, the first question, let me ask you this, which is, you mentioned this anecdote about how people are asking you, please write something about my film, because there is a kind of, I don't want to say need, but there is a real hope that from a filmmaker's point of view, it gets written about and hopefully it gets praise and it gets good notice and good reviews and things of that nature. And so this really is very suggestive of a kind of relationship, if you will, between the film and film criticism and film reviews and the reaction to the film, and giving the reaction, as it were, in very in prose or written type and the like, whether it be print media or online, digital, whatever the case may be. And so, as a film critic, could I ask you, what do you see is the relationship between cinema and film criticism?
Well, I feel like people sometimes are angry at film critics because they feel, and I hear this quite a bit, they feel as if we're some kind of like snobs sitting there with like a beret on, like, or like, Jay Sherman the critic, like it stinks, like we're like just out to just tear apart popular films. And I think part of that is because, and I say this as somebody that's on Rotten Tomatoes, it's an aggregator site. So people will just go on Rotten Tomatoes and see the percentage and say good, bad, right? But the percentage is made out of individual reviews. And you can click on these individual reviews to get a more nuanced perspective on what the critic thinks of it. And the last, I would say, 3 to 4 years, I don't use rating scores on my reviews anymore at all. I don't put number scores, letter grades, anything. I just write a review. And then you have to read the review to figure out what I think in the film. And I think films are so complex that it's hard to give it a numerical value to art. It's just my opinion on what I took in when I watched it. And I find that people were kind of fighting this idea of not grading films, or not, because they want to know what's the number, is it out of 10, and I'm just like, there is no number, it's just my words, and there's good things and there's bad things about every film. And I think that criticism, people feel like criticism is always bad, and I don't think it is. I think some of the best film critics make you understand films better, whether you like or dislike the film. It makes you understand why you like it or why you dislike it, why it makes you feel the way it does. And that those are the kinds of critics I like the best. Not the ones that, I'm not looking for somebody to be like, the sound was mixed a little too high or things like that. I'm looking for, how does this movie make you feel when you watched it? What are the critics' personal philosophies that influence them to take in the movie the way they did? That's what I'm more interested in, like the more humanized like approach to criticism, instead of kind of like being a robot where you're like calculating numbers and doing math in your head to figure out this movie, where it's on a scale, when all art's on an infinite scale for everybody, right? Because everybody has a different subjective opinion. I don't know if that makes sense. It's just I feel like it's weird to quantify art like that. It's just like, I just want to know how it made somebody feel.
No, I think that makes perfect sense. I can really sympathize with that approach, very much so. So I think that makes perfect sense to me, and I think in that way, from a certain point of view, I think that approach really gives a lot of deference to the work itself, which I think is a great thing. And so it's sort of it's a sign, I think, of you're really trying to grapple with the work and seeing what makes it tick. And so I find that approach to be quite splendid. and the I think you've of course approached film criticism in this way, and you of course have watched so many films, a large proportion of which have been devoted to in maybe directly or otherwise to your work. And so could I ask you also, have there been instances where maybe you have written about or approached a particular film and have given it let's say a review or some kind of criticism at one point, and then maybe later on you have revisited the film and you have a different take or a different reaction to that? Does that occur often for you?
Um, not so much with
Hmm.
not so much with films where I watched them after I don't want to say like I had the awakening, but where I started watching films differently. When I started being a critic, you just watch films different. Um, but I will say rewatching films I watched when I was younger and then rewatching them as an adult, 100% I have had like revelations like, holy crap, this movie was doing something completely different. And my life experience now makes me notice what's happening more than when I was a teenager. But you know, movies I watched like say a year ago and I rewatch them, I usually have the same kind of reaction to them. But I do enjoy, you know, rewatching films I haven't seen in decades and then reapplying critic knowledge on top of that, and seeing how they fare. And usually they fare better. I've noticed a lot of them. I noticed a lot more stuff going on in them than I used to when I just watched films for pleasure only with no kind of analysis or anything. You know, and there's a lot of people that they watch films like that all the time, and there's nothing wrong with that. That my boyfriend is a perfect example. He watches movies just for fun. He's not here to analyze them or anything. He's just watching them to enjoy them. And you know, and I feel like, you know, that's a good way to gauge also how good a film is. Like, what about somebody that doesn't analyze them? What do they think of it? I think everybody's opinions are valid in that sense. But yeah, mostly just films that I watched when I was younger and I rewatch them. I find a lot more in them than I used to.
That is really great because it's a perfect way for me to lead to what is my next question, which is you mentioned how you were watching films that you were younger, when you were younger, and then maybe you have, sometimes you might have a different reaction to them, revisiting them now. And so, could I ask you about the films that you were watching when you were growing up? Um, could you give us some examples of some of those films? And I say the word films, but I want to be as broad as possible. Films or TV or media or anything of that sort, because as I say, this is something I want to get into, which is it's not just films, which
Yeah.
is itself a very broad area. But it's not just that, and hopefully we can get into that a little bit. But to use the word films liberally, what are some of those, let's say, works or series or the like that you experienced growing up that you could say were real touchstone moments, landmark milestone moments for you that resonate for you even now?
Well, I got my love of film from my father. He's unfortunately passed away like 5 years ago, but he was a film buff and he just loved them. And his favorite thing to watch were horror movies. So I grew up watching horror movies constantly with my dad, and it was like a great thing. You know, we'd sit together on the couch and he put on all these horror movies. So I grew up watching like Hellraiser, and this is gonna sound bad because I was a little kid, but you know, my dad just explained to me like, these are people, this is fake, it's people in makeup, it's not real. So once I grasped, okay, it is real, it wasn't scary to me really. But yeah, I was like watching like Hellraiser, the Nightmare on Elm Street series was my absolute favorite and my dad's favorite. We watched all those. He took me to see them, a couple of them in the theaters. We watched like Puppet Master, stuff like that. Just Chucky, just all those kind of like fun 80s, you know, the heyday of, you know, slashers and Friday the 13th. We watched all that stuff growing up. so it just like to this day, I love horror. It's my favorite genre of anything to watch. And I love Halloween and all that kind of stuff. So he instilled this like love of horror films and makeup and special effects and monsters and dark things and goth, and so that kind of stuck with me my entire life. And then I would say the second most influential thing I saw was we had a network called Sci-Fi Channel, and they used to have Sci-Fi Anime Saturday. And I think I was like 11 or 12, and I saw Akira for the first time. And it just blew my mind. I'd never seen animation that looked like that had these themes. Cyberpunk was also introduced to me that way. I was just speechless. I couldn't believe this was a thing that existed. It blew my absolute dome. And after that, that's when I got into anime, and like it was like I was obsessed with it after that. So those are like the two main things that influenced me, were watching horror movies with my dad and Akira in the early 90s.
So much to say to this utterly splendid response. I kind of thought, oh, I wonder if Michelle is a fan of Akira. I don't know, but maybe she is. But she only has the Laserdisc and the shirt, and and so and of course you mentioned it just now. So that is really oh my goodness. We have many things in common, I think. But with regard to your film journey and the influence of your father and all these horror films, I'm right there with you. And so I have to ask you, for instance, as a fellow Nightmare on Elm Street film fan, so what are some of your favorite films from that series?
Oh, well, my all-time favorite is Dream Warriors, which is part 3. I think that's like everybody's favorite. For some reason, everybody likes Dream Warriors. It's one of the more fun ones. And actually, a second favorite, which is getting a lot more. It's been reappraised, is the second one, because it had the gay subtext and stuff that like everybody didn't notice until 10 years after it came out. And then there's a fabulous Scream Queen, that documentary about the star Jessie of that film, and it got reappraised. And that's a good example of a film I watched when I was a kid, didn't get any of that subtext, and then I watched it as an adult, and I was like, hey, wait a minute. I was like, this is homoerotic and stuff. I didn't notice any of this stuff until I was an adult. And I think I rewatched the whole franchise last year, and that's just a fantastic film. I'm so glad it got reappraised the way it did, and people figured out like it's one of the better entries of the Nightmare on Elm Street series. And I also like the one, I'm blanking on it, but when Wes Craven came back and directed it, New Nightmare, that's all meta, and it has Freddy actually exists in real life and they're playing themselves, and that's my other favorite one. I thought that one was fantastically done too.
Oh, I'm so glad you mentioned those. Yeah, if I could join you in your praise of Freddy's Revenge in Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2. There's so many great moments. The makeup, the Freddy Krueger makeup, I think is of the films, I think that's the scariest makeup. There's something quite raw and sinister about that makeup, and the teeth, the way that something about it's different than the rest, and also it has such a great. I mean, I know this is oft used, maybe an overused phrase, but for lack of a better phrase, it has a really great body horror type of slant to it because of the real physical effects of all this transformation. It's really out of this world. But I have so many favorite scenes, but one of my favorite scenes, it doesn't have it. It has the bird. And the bird attacking, and the music, and like the dad trying to kill and just destroying everything. That's one of the great. Oh, I love that. So I'm so glad you mentioned that. And and you mentioned also Hellraiser. Yes, Hellraiser. And so you watched Hellraiser when you were young, and so this is
Yes.
yeah, this is same with me. So could you tell us a little bit about what are some of your favorite films from that series, I suppose?
Yeah. And yeah, it's interesting kind of because people are gonna be like, man, where were Michelle's parents? I mean, they were there. My dad was there, but I never honestly had any restrictions on anything I watched growing up. My parents just figured I was responsible enough to figure out stuff, and I guess I never gave them any indication, and I grew up pretty normal, I guess, I'm all right. But yeah, Hellraiser, I like the first 3 films, and actually my favorite one is the second film. I feel like the second film just is the best as far as story. The music's fantastic. I love when they actually go into like Pinhead's like world, like just the evil doctor, and like just the Cenobites are great in it, and just the story's the best one in my opinion. After 3, they start getting less good. But the second one is absolutely fabulous. I absolutely love that one, and the first one's really good too. And the third one is also, I thought, great. And then after that, I could take them or leave them. I actually own them all, because I just for completionist sake. But yeah, so yeah, the second one's my favorite.
Wow, that's so great. Again, we have so many things in common. I too am a huge fan of Hellraiser. I should say that I have to really work. I admit I have to work a little bit harder to try to appreciate Hellraiser 3, Hell on Earth. That's one I admit I'm struggling with still. So I'm very encouraged to hear your enthusiasm for the film very much. But if we go to Hellraiser 2 in particular, yes, I'm right there with you. I am so impressed in how the world was expanded, and how the mythology was further enlarged, and the dialogue was so great, and so many great lines. But one of my favorites is Dr. Chenard and Julia. And they're saying, they're talking about Tiffany, and they're obviously watching Tiffany trying to figure out how to open this thing. And they're in some kind of chamber or something in the back, or hidden room. And the music the Christopher Young music is swelling up, and then things are happening. And what does the doctor say? He says, she's done it. And Julie says, oh, she certainly has. And then the doctor says, it's coming. And then Julia says, it certainly is. And then it certainly is, because it then comes and boom, everything's open up, and things explode. And then right, and then what does he say? It's not hands that call us, it is desire. And then it goes, that's so great.
Or the part where he's like, to think I was afraid,
when
he finally gets turned.
Yes, Dr. Chenard, yes, and the like. What a great moment. And then what does he say? Right, to think I hesitated, and then suddenly,
to think I hesitated.
And then the Leviathan huge
and it's just like
thing. And I loved when, I guess right, and I loved how when the thing goes on his head, he does a thing with his hand. It's not like he goes like that. He's like he has it like that with So I thought that was really great. And then it just goes from there. And then I learned the word Dr. Chenard, after what happens to him, he has the phrase, what does he say to Tiffany? He says, surgery is open, Tiffany. What was today's agenda? Ah, yes, evisceration. Ah, ha, 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 ha. And I remember when I was a kid, right? I didn't know what evisceration was. What does evisceration mean? So I looked up the word evisceration. I said, oh, that's what it meant. And actually, it came up later in my life on some standardized test or something. And so I looked at, I know what this word means, evisceration. I learned this from Hellraiser 2. So it really came in handy in terms of my education. So.
And they say horror movies rot your brain. They don't.
No,
they teach us things.
I agree. Yeah. Oh, please. Yes. They teach us things. Yes. Yeah. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just, That's another thing that I champion a lot is people not respecting certain genres of things because of the genre. Like for example, horror. There's this annoying term called post-horror that like popped up where people, or elevated horror, that's another one, where it's basically critics like the horror movie, but they don't want to admit it. So they're saying it's like transcended horror somehow. Like there's never been, art house horror before 2008 or something. I feel like, there's every single genre has something it could teach you. And it just uses, the parameters of how they make their movies to talk to the audience about things. And you can learn all kinds of things from horror movies: love, fear of other, and they also reflect the society that they're made in, like misogyny and sexism, and like, for example, Nightmare on Elm Street 2, it could be read as, especially back in the 80s, somebody being afraid to come out as gay, right? And hiding it inside themselves. And kind of like, that's how Freddy was. He was like, he was scared of admitting something inside of him was different, and it manifested itself in this fear. And there's all kinds of horror films that deal with these type of things, and the only way they can talk about these sensitive subjects is by putting this layer of fantasy over it, or sci-fi or horror. So I just get a little annoyed sometimes when critics try to act like this horror movie is better than other horror movies. It's better than the genre that created it because it talks about serious subjects or something like that. When all horror movies are viable, in my opinion.
Oh, well said, my friend. Very well said. I have a similar viewpoint, but I couldn't have said it better than how you really stated it and exclaimed it in a way that really needs championing. So thank you very much for this. And of course, right, you and I, of course, will be the first to acknowledge that there are some duds. There are a lot of duds out there as well.
Yeah.
And so it's not like, I know that I know this. You're not saying that all horror films are great and everything like that.
No, for sure.
Yeah. So, but even in the duds, there's something going on. That's what you're saying, right? And there's always something going on. That and the genre is of course not for everyone, but for those people regarding which the genre works, it really works. And I think there's much to be said. You're absolutely right, my friend. I agree 100%. But then returning a little bit to your earlier response about how you said you're influenced a lot by watching horror films and the genre growing up. And then the other thing you mentioned was the Sci-Fi Channel. And this leads to your introduction to anime, the world of anime. And I'm assuming this love of anime is existing to this very day, correct?
Yes. Oh, yeah. Yep.
And so the first anime that you saw was Katsuhiro Otomo's work, the animation version of his story, Akira.
Yes.
And what was it, the English dub? Was it that?
Yeah. Back in the 90s, we didn't get the subtitle versions. Everything was dubbed. I didn't see subtitled anime probably till more the late 90s. Mid 90s, it was harder in the States. It was very hard to get your hands on it. You had to like know a guy and get they call, fan subs. So people people that, and they were of nefarious quality, the translations too. Somebody that maybe knew Japanese would put subtitles on them and dub them on a VHS. And then I would have to like pay like $40 shipping, and I would get just giant cardboard boxes of dubbed anime. I used to watch it raw too. I would just watch it in Japanese. I still to this day, I speak a little teeny bit just from like picking up because I watch so much Japanese media. But I was watching anime with no subs in Japanese raw sometimes. That was how big of a nerd I was about it. But yeah, it was the English dub version.
So that would have been what's the phrase? The streamlined dub version. So
Yep.
with uh, um, right, the colonel's voice. What did he say at some point? He's talking. He says, "They don't teach tact at the academy," or something like that. Yeah, and the scientist, talking about Tetsuo. He said, "To think that he could achieve so much power," right? And right after Tetsuo has made his first attack and first encounter with the children, right? And the voice of Leonardo, right?
Mhm.
As or Kaneda, right?
Yeah.
And they changed the names of some of the characters too, I think.
Mhm.
So Yamagata becomes Yama, I think.
Mhm.
But no,
And they
no,
would just butcher
yeah.
everybody's names too. They would just like the pronunciation was just, especially back in the 90s, it was just that's what you got, but they weren't very I do like now, and this goes for all media, foreign media I watch it in its original language with subs on. But there are a few old anime from the 90s that I have an attachment to their old bad English dubs just because that's how I watched them. Nostalgia. That's how I watched them when I was a kid. So, and Akira is one of those, which when I rewatch it now, I watch it in Japanese. But every once in a while, I'll kick on that old streamline dub for the dopamine hit of the nostalgia. But I mean, everybody likes Kaneda,
Yeah,
Tetsuo.
yeah.
I always thought they screamed it the best. That was just me.
No, I agree with you. I like that English dub actually. There are there are quite a number of differences with the Japanese, but I think they work well for the tone of the story, and
Yeah.
they capture, as you say, those moments very nicely. And so this is really great because this, of course, led to your watching of a lot of other anime. And so what are some examples, other examples of some anime that you watched that really affected you? So you watched Akira, and you said that had a huge impact on you. So what were some others that came after that for you?
Another one I watched in the 90s, my favorite ones were it was Akira, Vampire Hunter D. I love that one. Um, Macross, I'm probably saying that bad. Macross, gosh, Wicked City, Ninja Scroll, Demon City, Shinjuku, um, Devilman. I like that one a lot when I was growing up. Casern. They like spelt that like 5 different ways when they kept releasing them here in the States. They would like spell his name different. Um, gosh, I was really into like anything Madhouse did. I loved. I also like some of like the little the the stuff like Geno Cyber, um, like the really gory anime that like were all the rage in the 80s. They don't really make them like that anymore, I've noticed. But just like because they would release the really pulpy stuff over here, it felt like we didn't start getting like the more art house kind of anime stuff till the 2000s because they were trying to sell it. They thought anime was kind of just for kids and for people that like gory stuff, and they didn't realize that it's such a huge medium that encompasses all kinds of different kind of topics. There's like coming of age stories that are anime, and there's horror, and there's drama, and there's sci-fi. There was all this different stuff that they weren't bringing over here. So I was probably watching like all the like the trashier stuff a little bit because that's what they brought over here.
And this is really I'm so excited about this because I wouldn't call myself an anime expert, but you mentioned a lot of titles that I too was really fan of. And so and so you follow anime even now, is that correct?
Yes, yes.
And so I have to ask you the follow up, which is, so what are some of those series or anime films or series now that are really your favorites at the moment, or your recommendations for us at the moment?
Yeah, the new stuff, it's actually it's it's funny because in the 90s we would get anime in little spurts of anime, like whatever they decide to localize. And now we live in a golden era where they simulcast everything on Crunchyroll real time, which is like magical to me. I would have killed to have that as like a 14-year-old. So now so much stuff comes out, it's hard to keep up. Some more recent things I've liked are, I like One Punch Man. I like JoJo. That's not recent really, but you know, every year they make more of it. I liked Devilman, Crybaby, Tatami Galaxy. These aren't kind of newish, but I like Monster. That's another good one. Made in Abyss. I like that one a lot. And here, actually, you know, last year they re-released Evangelion, which Evangelion is my all-time favorite anime ever. And End of Evangelion is my favorite anime movie. So that was like all the rage about a year ago here, just because if you release it, it's kind of hard to get it here now because the license lapsed. Trying to think of more stuff. That's pretty much all I can think of at the top of my head right now.
Oh my goodness, this is really great. You mentioned so many there. If I could just join you in the shout out. You mentioned Evangelion, Neon Genesis Evangelion. I love Evangelion. I think that's just one of the most profound works. Period. It's so profound, and the deeper you go, you're like, what the heck's going on here? I have no idea what's going on, and that I love that. And then you also mentioned Monster. This is the anime series and also the manga, or is it also?
I have not read the manga. I've only seen the anime. Yeah.
I think the series is so great, and the manga I was addicted to it. I couldn't wait to find out what happened next, and so that is an intense one. I love that one so much. Yeah, and that's pretty dark too. It goes in some dark places, but wow, this is I'm so happy to hear this, because just to see your enthusiasm for this is just so, how should I put it, for lack of a better word, very heartwarming. This is so great. And so you say also that you watch a lot of let's say anime, and also maybe we can just take a step back and say just cinema and films and entertainment as well. But also, while we're on the topic of entertainment and media writ large, I also want to say that that's not the only thing, of course, that you are very much into. I understand that you are also into video games.
Yes.
And the like. So could you tell us a little bit about that? I'm not the biggest video game expert, but I'd love to hear about it. So could you tell us also, maybe in a similar sort of way? So maybe growing up, what were some of those video game influences and landmark moments for you that led up to where you are right now as a video game enthusiast and expert? So let's begin with your experiences growing up and video games.
Yeah, I would say that also is thanks to my dad. My first video game I ever played was on Atari 2600. This is gonna date me. Y'all can do the math later. But yeah, Atari 2600, Frogger. They had that Empire Strikes Back Atari game where you could like wrap the rope around the at legs and fly underneath them and stuff. And but that wasn't too, what was the other one? Yeah, Frogger, that, and like Qbert, I like that also. And then in 1987, I got an NES. And like pretty much as soon as I had like, you know, hand-eye coordination, I had a controller in my hand. And so I grew up on the NES, had all the NES games. Everybody played Contra, Mario, all that kind of stuff. Then I got a Super Nintendo. And then I got a Nintendo 64, and then I got, you know, a PlayStation, and then I kind of went PlayStation mostly after that. I did have an Xbox, and now I have a PS4 and a Switch and a bunch of handheld consoles that I play on.
And so what were some of your favorite games then as examples, you with all these consoles growing up? What were some of those games, for example? So you said Contra. I played I also played Contra. I was a big. I was living outside of Japan at the time, so it would have been Mega Man. So the Mega
Oh
Man
yeah, yeah.
games, and I was. I mean, I haven't played them recently. I mean, they're called Rockman, but
Hmm.
the Mega Man games, it's you have to find the right power to to
Yeah.
to fight that particular bad guy, and the like. So there was that. I was there too in terms of NES and Super NES
Mhm.
and things. So what were some of those games, for example? Maybe the NES and the Super NES as a starter. So
The NES started my love of Japanese RPGs, JRPGs. So Dragon Warrior, you guys call it Dragon Quest, but we call it Dragon Warrior here. Um, that was my first RPG, and I was obsessed after that. And then I played Final Fantasy. And then on Super Nintendo, my all-time favorite game ever is Chrono Trigger. Um, and then Earthbound, Final Fantasy 6, which they called Final Fantasy 3 in the States because then they didn't bring them over, all of the games over back in the day. I will say that was one of the, when I was like, 13 or 14 or whatever, and I was like, there were Final Fantasies that came out and I didn't play them. Like the finding out that you guys had all these Final Fantasy games in Japan, and they were being kept from us, dang it. But yeah, so Earthbound, really loved that one. Just every RPG I could get my hands on, I played. Illusion of Gaia, I like that one a lot. And gosh, there's like just so many games. I played so many, and to this day, I still play every Final Fantasy that comes out. I played Final Fantasy 15. I played Final Fantasy 7 Remake when that came out, and I'm playing Ghost of Tsushima right now. I'm just finishing that up, which is absolutely fantastic. I love samurai stuff, so I was super into it, and it's just they absolutely nailed every aspect of it.
oh, that's great. And you mentioned Ghosts of Tsushima, and so as I say, I admit I don't play much games now, but I know of Ghosts of Tsushima because it's made quite an impact in I think in many aspects, and I try to follow this to the extent I'm able to. But uh, so you are still a very active enthusiast in terms of video game play and the like. And so you mentioned Ghosts of Tsushima. Are there any other games now that you think are worthy of mention, or to recommend, or just to mention as games that you are really into at the moment?
Mhm. Well, interestingly enough, because I'm also a fan of cinema, my favorite game creator is Hideo Kojima. Um, and he made Death Stranding, which I started a little, there's a little drama because I put Death Stranding in my top 10 films that year because because Kojima is also a huge fan of cinema, and his games are very filmic, to the point where it's kind of like his thing where people say his cutscenes are like 7 hours long and stuff. That I mean, but he has. If you ever hear Kojima talk about games, he actually grew up watching cinema, like real deal cinema, like Tarkovsky and stuff like that. Like he was like heavy into that art house film and foreign film, and he still talks about film now. He used to write film reviews, all kinds of stuff, and he still does now too. But Death Stranding is one of the greatest games I've ever played in my life. Like it's so deep and so meaningful and such a work of an auteur that like I put it in my top 10 films of the year, which was apparently crazy talk for a critic, and I had to defend that choice. And I felt like it was straddling two mediums equally well. So I said, you know what, I'm just going to do it.
Oh, that is very interesting. I'm glad you mentioned Kojima, yeah, oh, that's very interesting. I Well, this is very fascinating. So this is an indication, I think, of uh, or an example of your perspective or philosophy, if you will, in terms of the fluidity of the media
Mm-hmm.
and entertainment media, I use the word media as in the plural, right? Media, many different
Yeah.
types, right? And so, right. Oh, this is quite fascinating to me. So, this means, therefore, that do you see or how should I put it? What, how should I put it? What are some other examples, would you say, of, say, of video games that you think, in your mind, could qualify as a kind of cinematic experience? Or have there not been many other examples? I mean, are there any other examples that you could say,
Yeah.
for those of us who might not necessarily be video game enthusiasts, but who are cinema enthusiasts? What are some other examples of the video game experience that could also be cinematic experiences from your point of view?
I would say a very good example of this is The Last of Us series. There's two games, The Last of Us and Last of Us Part 2, which actually came out earlier this year. I think people that don't play video games a lot don't realize, because graphics and have gotten so good, and there's so much raw power behind the games and the engines, that they're almost indistinguishable from movies. Some of them are indistinguishable from movies, except that you control the protagonist. And for some reason that like throws people off. But I feel like people get too hung up on labels for things sometimes. And my argument for Death Stranding, Pixar makes 2-hour CG movies and people call them movies. But if Kojima has a 2-hour long CG cutscene, why isn't that a movie? In my opinion, right? It's the same exact thing, except one's in a game and one is, and both of them are passive too. I mean, you're not touching the controller the whole time. Kojima's telling you a story. You just watch it. He doesn't let you do nothing when he's telling this story. And I mean, and he also uses real actors that he scans them into the game, right? So all the actors in Death Stranding are real people in real life, and they're credited as such in the credits of the game. Like it's like, so and so is this actor in real life, and they have their facial and everything. So and they act it too, like they do their own movements, and then he maps them and then all that. So but The Last of Us definitely was one of the more prominent games that I thought really melded those two things together, the cinematic and the game, to the point where the game's almost taken a back seat, I would say, the gameplay itself.
I'm so fascinated to hear this perspective from you. So I think, and as I say, I don't know why exactly I'm not into video games as much as I might have been when I was younger. I think maybe it's just to do with, I think, time and the
Mm-hmm.
investment more than anything else.
Yeah.
It's a lot of energy, I think, that one must use in order to get into this. It's like with cinema as well. So, maybe my energy levels have been decreasing as I've been getting older, perhaps. But although I love the Switch, the Nintendo Switch. I don't know all the games, but my favorite game now is Splatoon 2. I love that game.
Yeah.
I love that game.
Yeah, Splatoon.
I don't. Unfortunately, I don't think you're in North America, correct?
Yeah.
So, and I'm in Japan, so I don't think there's the ability to be the crossover. So, unfortunately, I don't think we can play in the same space. Otherwise, I'd love to battle you or to be on the same team. But yeah, I love that game, and I'm playing, and maybe my kids are like, "Can I play the Switch?" No, wait, let me finish this. Let me finish.
Yeah.
So I love that so much. That is my favorite game right now. That's dangerous to me too, because when I start, I can't stop, and so so maybe I'll try to use that to explore more games and the like, especially from this conversation. Speaking of that, also I want to ask you the flip side, which is, are there any examples in cinema? Because as we know, there have been a lot of attempts to make films based off of, directly or indirectly, the video game experience or video game stories. So are there any examples in films that you think do this very well or successfully? And when I ask this, please interpret it as you like. The way I'm thinking it is, these can be direct video game to cinema adaptations, or they can be what you might see as being a video game type of experience as captured in cinema. So however you want to take that question, my friend, what are some examples of you think this is being done very well?
Actually, there is one thing I think is very specific. The show Black Mirror, they had an episode called Bandersnatch, in which it was kind of like a choose your own adventure, where it would play like clip of the guy doing a thing, and then it would say, do you want to do this or do you want to do this? And it would pause it on, like when you were watching it on Netflix. And I was doing it. I have Netflix on my PS4, so I was using the controller to do it. But you could use like a remote control, and then you could pick choice A or choice B. And then if you pick choice B, it would play out what choice B was, and then you'd get another choice, and then you would progress the story that way, which I thought was like this really interesting melding of a show and you controlling the protagonist. But the kind of the trick to it, to Bandersnatch, was the whole idea was that you're not really in control. There is no choice. No matter what you did, something bad happened to the main character. So, and no matter what choices you made, it just kept getting worse and worse and worse. And actually, which is really clever, the character started catching on that somebody else was controlling them. So you would pick stuff and you try to like fight your choices and stuff. It was actually done incredibly well. It didn't it didn't do very well critically, I think, because it was like I said, it was kind of like it was encroaching into territory some people aren't just comfortable with, which is video games. Some people don't play video games at all, and I think they kind of resented that Bandersnatch was making them play a game, basically. And it was also, you had to put like 3 or 4 hours into it to see the entire theme it was trying to play out. But that's like the most video game piece of media that wasn't a video game I've ever seen. Most movies I've seen that are based on games aren't very good. Some of them are fun. Like I like, Resident Evil. That was kind of fun. Trying to think of some that are good. Can't really think of any, to be honest.
Sorry, I didn't mean to ask a difficult question, although you answered it very brilliantly, in fact. So thank you. Yeah, I was actually, as I was asking it, I was trying to think of how I would answer the question. And there have been some interesting attempts, let me put it that way, in the past. So, yeah, it's an interesting genre that I think is still working itself out. Let's put it that way. In cinema anyway. So, well, that is great. And then this, of course, we talked about video games. We've talked about, of course, anime and cinema. We've touched on manga a little bit and the like. And so this brings me also back to something that you referred to earlier in the conversation, which is your physical media collection. Now, I know you've mentioned you've mentioned Netflix, you've mentioned streaming services, so I can assume, therefore, that part of your media consumption is reliant on streaming services. And so there's that, but there's also the physical media component. So could you tell us just very roughly how many titles do you have in your physical media collection right now, a given estimate?
Maybe like, I would say like 2,000, maybe. If we count it like, everything's separate. Mostly it's all DVD and Blu-ray, mostly Blu-ray now, because I've been slowly converting my DVDs to Blu-ray. I have a couple 4Ks, but I don't want to rebuy my whole collection again, so I only buy 4Ks of things I don't already own. So that's a little scarce, but and I have a few like little oddities up there. I have like a couple tapes people have given me. I used to have tapes in the 90s, but I got rid of those. They just take up a lot of space. I have a few laser discs. I have a Akira laser disc, and then I have Godzilla versus Mecha Godzilla I bought on a trip to Japan, which was hard to get through customs. And the guy was like, what is this giant, because they x-ray your bag, and he was like, what is this giant thing? And I was like, it's Godzilla versus Mecha Godzilla. And he was like, and then he opened it and he was like, oh, it really is. And he was like, awesome. But yeah, I would say around 2,000 discs or so.
Oh my goodness. You are a person very close to my heart. The fact that you mentioned the Laserdiscs Akira and also Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla. Thank you very much for that. Two films that I adore greatly. And so that is very impressive in terms of your physical media collecting. And you also have a lot of memorabilia I can see. I think for a lot of people, they might be interested to pause part of this conversation just to see exactly what they can catch behind you there. I can see, for example, well, Creep Show, Freddy Krueger, Godzilla, Akira. I can see GTO. I think I see,
Yeah.
and Duff Beer. I think is there. The
Oh, yeah,
Simpsons.
I love The Simpsons. I went to Florida and I went to Universal Studios and they have like a Simpsons town thing and you can like buy Duff beer. It's actually an energy drink, but I had to get it.
Oh, was this in Florida? What
Yeah.
was it? Please correct me if I'm wrong. Is it Universal Studios or
Yep.
is
Yep.
yes, yes. And there was the Simpsons ride too, right?
Yep.
I
It was like
l-
4D or whatever. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, that was so cool.
hmm
I love that ride. I love the Simpsons too. I
Yeah.
admit I haven't seen everything, the latter half, but I was really into it uh, up to maybe season 10, 11, something like that. And then
Yeah.
I moved out. I moved and I moved back to Japan, and so I haven't been able to catch up with it since. But during those first several seasons, I was hardcore into The Simpsons. That's for sure.
Yeah. The golden era.
Yeah, yeah. That was such a great time. And some of the dialogue too is great. I forget what the episode was, but there's something about uh, what was it? Homer says something like, I can't let that happen. I won't let that happen, and I can't let that happen. I forget what that episode was, but it was such a great. Homer Simpson's lines are just like iconic. I don't know, just something brilliant about it. But oh my goodness. So what would you say is the breakdown or ratio between the films? So in other words, when you watch films, what's the percentage of films that you watch on physical media versus the percentage of films that you watch on streaming nowadays?
Oh gosh, it's probably 75% physical, 25%. Is that math? Yeah. 25% uh streaming. I'm not a huge fan of streaming. It's kind of like a necessary evil to me at this point because just some stuff you can't watch unless you watch it on streaming now. Um I just prefer to have the disc for preservation purposes. I actually worry about film preservation in the future as far as streaming is concerned because Netflix actually isn't great. For example, I can't buy Devilman Crybaby in the States. There's no physical release because it's on Netflix. They don't feel the need to release it physically. There's like a really expensive uh, um, set you can buy from Japan. Uh, and you know this because you live there, obviously, but the physical media in Japan was like crazy expensive. When I came to visit, I was like, oh man, I'm going to hit up Japanese Blu-ray. No, heck no, I didn't. I looked at one price. I was like, nope, I'm not bringing nothing back. But that laser disc actually was cheap. But, the physical prices there are insane. So, I feel like they're not in any type of a hurry to put their media on discs. And then if Netflix goes under, those movies are just gone. Like there's been a few they've let Criterion release, thank goodness. I mean, they're good ones, but I mean, I just don't like I don't like the idea of owning data only because that can be taken away. The cloud can be dissipated and then now you're left with nothing. And but a disc, I hold it in my hand, I have it forever. It can never be altered once it's on the disc. There's a lot of things where they're censoring things now on streaming that weren't censored, or they're not in the right aspect ratio. That's another thing I don't like. And also, you don't get as good a quality because it's compressed when it's going through your internet. When you have a disc, it's pressed, it's 50 gigs, the whole thing's there. It looks great. It's rock solid when you don't have the internet. It's funny because around this time, Halloween, people start trying to hit me up to borrow movies because stuff they want, their old favorites aren't on streaming, or they can't even rent them. And they're like, hey, Michelle, do you have this and this? And I'm like, here, borrow it, because, streaming, you only get what they let you watch, right? So, I mean, I don't think streaming is bad inherently. It's very convenient, and maybe people don't have space for a lot of movies, and that's perfect for them. But I'm just wary of how it will affect film preservation going on from now.
No, that is, I think, very well said. And I think your sentiments, I think, are shared by a number of other people, I'm sure. So I am not fully in the streaming services camp necessarily myself, and for a number of reasons, many of which are practical. For me, in terms of my own inability to engage with it because of my time schedule and the like. But there are some other issues that are quite that you've mentioned that I think I can definitely see. And so I mean, I get this too. I get to the fact that I think similar issues are inherent in the distribution mechanisms of cinema writ large. In other words, we are in a way kind of we are sort of we can see films because of the distributor's choice in whatever that distributor distributes in the theaters, and then also by extension physical media labels and Blu-ray labels and the like. And so there is one argument that can be said that what you suggested in terms of streaming is in fact an inherent issue in media consumption writ large. However, I agree with you in that Blu-rays and DVDs, even in that discussion, there's such a variety, it seems. There are some labels, of course, that are bigger than others. There are studios that are releasing their films that they have the rights to, et cetera. But I think we can also see that there is still a huge wealth of variety. And especially if we go out of certain territories, like the Region A territories, out into Region B, et cetera. And so that even further enlarges the scope in which of accessibility and availability. And so that issue that you bring up, I think, is a very legitimate one to raise. And I think that's one that I think we all who are media lovers and film lovers going forward really have to consider when we think about the changing landscape of media consumption. So you're absolutely right to bring that up. I think that's an incredibly legitimate point. Yeah, so you wow, my goodness, this is so great because I can't stop talking because you're bringing up, I'm so sorry, you're just bringing up all these great, I just want to yeah, like, yes, you're right. I just want to, I'm sorry, I will shut up right now. I'm so sorry. I'm just, this is just an example of why I'm so happy to have you here because you, as I say, you bring such a wonderful perspective on all this stuff that I love. I absolutely love. And I think we have a lot of similarities in terms of taste. But also there are many things that you are expert in that I am not, many things. And so it's been such a great pleasure to hear your take on this. I suppose, I suppose one of the things I wanted to address before we go to the next set of questions, which is, you bring up this idea of, well, you brought up in the past the idea of your role as a film critic. And it's something that you brought up, and I wanted to ask you, which is, I think that you are in a very interesting position because, well, let me ask you this. Do you have a sense of choice in terms of what you can choose to review and what you choose not to review? Or is it more or less something that the titles that you have to review, for example? Is there a sense of choice as to what you can and can't choose to write about?
There is. The website I work for, basically, the different writers can just we have like a spreadsheet, and you can just call movies that you want to review in advance. It's so nobody steps on anybody's toes or anything. So, you know, you put your name in and then the movie that you want to review. So before it comes out. So then when it comes out, they go, oh, so-and-so wanted to review that one. But also I do have things, I get screeners from companies, and sometimes they'll just send me, you know, like certain companies will send me, like, for example, Mondo Macabro sends me physical screeners, and I don't really choose what movies they send me. I mean, their wheelhouse is my jam anyway, so I always know it's something I'll probably be into, but I don't get to choose which ones they send me, but I'm obligated to review them once they've sent them to me, obviously. So which is great because I watch a lot of stuff that maybe wouldn't have been on my radar normally. But I would say most of the time I get a choice on what I want to review. Sometimes I don't. Sometimes I get assigned things, which isn't a big deal. You know, I would say honestly the hardest part of being a reviewer is deadlines. A lot of people don't work well under pressure or under, you know, they get nervous when somebody says something has to be done by this time. They get you know, all anxious about it, and that's something you got to work with, definitely. And also if I see a new release movie, it behooves you to get it out as soon as you see it, right? Because that's when the hype's high. The movie just came out, everybody, I want to see so and so thought of this movie before I spend $14 to go see it. So, you know, there's a little bit of a time crunch involved as well. But most of those things are easily, you know, after you do it for a while, you get used to it.
This is really fascinating for me, as I say, because I'm not a critic, and so you know, one of the things I wanted to ask you too, which is what is it? And please, you can answer this not just in the context of cinema, but just in books, in games, in anime, anything you want. What is it now in your position as someone who watches a lot of stuff? What do you try? What do you identify in the things that you watch now, that you're watching for the first time? What are some of those aspects that you identify as being, quote unquote, like good cinema or good works of art? I mean, is there anything in particular that you look for, or any kind of feeling that you want to feel that will make you or compel you or make you want to write something, let's say a glowing review or something? So what are some of those aspects of works now that you identify as being important to you to make a work a really good work from your point of view?
The first thing that makes that inspires me is a movie that makes me feel any emotion strongly, and that does not need necessarily be positive. A movie that makes me feel angry, a movie that makes me happy or sad, or anything that makes me feel any kind of emotion strongly, I feel like did something right. Because you know, there's a lot of movies that come out and they're just there to be entertainment. They don't want to make anybody too angry, anybody too sad. It's like, I don't want to say like, you know, like a Marvel movie, but you know, like maybe some Marvel movies would be fit into this, where it's like an adventure. It's just for you, escapism. That's the word I'm looking for, escapism. And there's nothing wrong with that. But a movie that I really get inspired to write about makes me feel an emotion very strongly. A movie that I watched recently that did that is I'm Thinking of Ending Things, the new Charlie Kaufman film on Netflix. It was a film that was very, it started out one way and ended another, and it made me feel intrigued and upset and sad and angry at points, and it was very intimate from the creator, and you could tell it meant something to him. I also very drawn to films that are self-indulgent, like they just let the director do whatever he wanted, and it's kind of has like really high highs and really low lows because of it, because it's just somebody's soul just bared out, like whatever they were feeling is very passionate. Like that's a very good example of that kind of a movie. Another recent movie I saw that I really made me feel things was Possessor, which is the new film from Brandon Cronenberg, which is David Cronenberg's son. It's like this just incredibly intense, like mind, like if David Cronenberg does body horror, his son does what I like to call mind horror. It's very psychological, just destroying and deconstructing someone's psyche. And it was like just this really intense, visceral experience that left me I felt just empty after I saw it, but not because, you know, I didn't feel anything, because I felt so much that I just felt like tired after I saw it. It was a fantastic film, by the way. It comes out in like a week or two. But long story short, I look for films that make me feel emotions and then go from there.
And as you say, it doesn't necessarily have to be a specific type of emotion. It can be something positive, it can be something negative, it can be something more neutral, whatever those might be. So that is a great approach. And so, what are some things that, say, on the opposite side, what are some things that you see in cinema that you find maybe not so appealing for you?
Hmm. Um, a lot of movies that I end up not liking are derivative, and you know, and it's hard to quantify derivative, because any movie you watch, you can find another movie that influenced them, because people don't make art in a vacuum, right? It's like every artist is like a combination of all their influences mixed in a blender and then put out, and then they make their own art. But you know, sometimes I feel like movies weren't made to further the art or even be just escapism. They were made just for money. And there's just no passion behind it. They're just generic, overproduced, bland. The worst thing to me is to be bland. I mean, I would actually prefer a movie that's egregiously terrible to the point where, like, it's, you know, it at least makes me feel something. Just a bland movie that's just there and it's just hitting all the check marks, you know, for a certain demographic, and it's not trying to do anything. You know, I mean, I guess those movies have to be there to kind of the meat and potatoes of the industry, just to keep it running, you know, keep people working. But yeah, and the worst thing for a film for me is for it to be generic or bland.
Yeah, that's a very valid point. And also, you mentioned the idea of if something seems just to be 100% based off of the profit motive. And you know, we have to be absolutely clear, of course, this is a commercial medium.
Mm-hmm.
And so it relies on profit in order to be able to survive. And so it's commercial cinema is the norm, I suppose, in terms of a lot of the media that I think is covered a lot. And so you know, we just have to keep this in mind. And so there is the sense of what will cater to audiences, which I think is a very valid point. However, you're absolutely right too, and there's a line that can be crossed, and we can kind of intuit this or sense this as viewers and consumers when you can see that a film is only there to just to get your dollars or to get
Mm-hmm.
your money, and you can really sense that. And I feel a similar way. If I sense that with a piece of work, then I get turned off. And I think this is and because especially too, I think you're this way too. It's like we're really trying our best to work with the film, and so you have to sort of meet us halfway. And so you
Yeah.
have to, you know, so and if we're trying our best and you're just doing it just to get our money,
Mm-hmm.
then it's a little bit of a turnoff for me. And so I'm really glad that you put it in those ways, especially as a professional like yourself. So that's great. But as I say, or as you say, you also try your best to work with the film and to grapple with it. So I think your approach is top notch. And I think I speak for many when I say that it is indeed very top notch. And I hope that you continue with the great work that you're doing. So Michelle, I do want to ask you in, I think, the remaining time that we have. This has been a great conversation, by the way. So
Yeah, I really enjoyed it.
yeah, thank you so much for this. And I would love to continue this if it's okay with you sometime in the future. Would it be okay for you to, would it be okay if I can have you back and we can
Oh,
continue
sure.
this discussion? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Oh, I would love that so much, Michelle. I really appreciate this. This has been so much fun. But you know, before we go, I do want to ask you, and I think you have some titles perhaps that you can show us. So in the final moments that we have, what are some film recommendations that you would like to make to us?
Oh,
And
sure.
they can be anything, or I say film, but they can be recommendations, anything you want. Could you leave us with some recommendations? And this will give us yet another window into the type of person you are. So please, the floor is yours. So what are some recommendations you'd like to give to us?
So I picked out three physical releases that are recent-ish that I think are just fantastic. They're probably going to be flipped, I think, because my phone flips the names, but you'll be able to see this set right here. It's just I'm probably saying his name wrong, Jodorowsky. I hope I'm saying that right. But this is just a fabulous set. I actually got this is the Arrow, so this is the region B. I'm region free, which is the way to be. If you collect films, get you a region free player. It's $100. It'll be the best $100 you ever spent. So this is the region B Arrow set. There's also a region A set as well that came out. It's actually the same company released it in both regions. It's the exact same transfers, extras, everything. There's like a poster in here. But it's a set of 4 of his films: Fando and Lee's, El Topo, The Holy Mountain, Psycho Magic, A Healing Art. And this Psycho Magic, A Healing Art actually was just released to Blu-ray in this set. It hadn't been released previous to this, so that's specific to the set. But these movies looked fabulous. The transfers, just beautiful. And there's a really nice, there's a poster in here. There's a booklet that you can read about, it's a very long booklet, some wonderful essays on the films too. And every disc has like an hour and a half extras on it. Like if you like this man's films, this is the set to get. And then my other one is the Godzilla set, which is, I can't believe Criterion released this. I mean, because they released the Godzilla, like we know that previously. But when this was, I think this was Spine 1000, right? Yeah, this was their 1000th one. And I just can't believe this is a set that Criterion put out. It's so pop art and fun and just crazy giant. I don't have it on this desk, but I also got the Gamera set that Arrow did so I could have a big kaiju battle on my bookshelf. But it just trips me out that they put this out, and it's a great set. There's a lot of extras. I love this look. It's so just, and I have it proudly displayed. It's like up like this. It's towering over everything, just like Godzilla should be. But if you don't have this set, it's fantastic if you're a fan of Godzilla. And I hope they do the later eras too, because the Blu-rays that are out in here aren't the best. And I would appreciate the Criterion treatment. And this one I just watched today. I've actually seen this before. I used to have the old Kino DVD that had an atrocious transfer. Like it legit looked like a VHS, like was just dumped onto a DVD. It was really bad. But I Come and See is one of the greatest movies I've ever seen, honestly. And the treatment Criterion gave this film, it looks just the transfer is amazing. It's gorgeous. There's so many just details, and the sound design in this film is incredible also. And it's just, I do want to preface this one with it's really hard watch. This is a rough movie. So if you're not in a good headspace, feeling anxiety or bad, I would just wait to be in a better headspace before you watch this, because it's depressing. But this release is one of the best I've ever seen. And those are my 3 that I had.
Oh, wow. Wow. brilliant stuff. I applaud those choices. I echo everything that you say. You've just mentioned Come and See, which is one of the most harrowing works. In many ways, that is like a horror film. And
Yes.
so we were talking about horror films before. That is like a real bona fide horror film, really tough, but such a great, I mean, a great as in cinematically, in terms of
Yes.
a sort of enthralling, absorbing experience. So you're absolutely right to bring that up. And also, you bring up another criterion, which is Godzilla, the great Spine 1000. So I forgot to ask you while we're on the topic, what are some of your favorite Godzilla films, by the way? You mentioned Godzilla versus
Uh,
Mechagodzilla. Are there any others? And you can go into the Heisei era or
yeah.
the Reiwa era, anything you want.
I'll look at this one. Let's
Yeah,
see, pick
please.
off here. Let's see. I like Mothra versus Godzilla a lot. I like Son of Godzilla. Okay, Son of Godzilla is like super goofy. But I don't know, it's just fun. That one's just a fun one. Of course, Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla. I also like Terror of Mechagodzilla, and from the later ones, I like they call it Godzilla 1985 here. And then what's the one that Kitamura directed? It's also ridiculous. It's like he made it in like 2008, I think, or something. It was like the last one before Shin Godzilla, which I also love. Um, but those are my favorites. Oh, and Godzilla versus King Kong, which is also super silly.
Oh, yeah. So the Godzilla film. So Final Wars, is that the one that
Yeah,
you're?
Final
Yeah,
Wars.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, so that's yeah, that's amazing. So yeah, I'm so glad. Also, you mentioned Son of Godzilla. Thank you so much for Son of Godzilla. You know, it's right. It's not the greatest film ever, but it's still there's something quite innocent about that, and
Mhm.
it really goes to the heart of what I think a lot of these kaiju films are, which are the kaiju films also are wonderful opportunities for children's films, and there's nothing they're really brilliant in how they capture it. And you mentioned Gamera too, and Gamera I think really is, I think it captures this essence quite splendidly. But
Yeah, I like how you can follow like the history of Japan through their Godzilla films and what was going on in their society, like by the what's happening in each film as they go, which is I actually tell a lot of people, you know, if you just read about, it's fun to like watch a Godzilla movie and then kind of read what was going on in Japan at the time. I wish I would have brought, I have a book over there that talks about this in more depth, but it talks about environmentalism and in Japan and how it influenced some of the Godzilla films, because they're always about some sort of force, right? That's like attacking the environment, and Godzilla is kind of representing like the Earth fighting back, right? Like, or like, you know, how man affects Earth and all this stuff. But and the Gamera films are similar in that way, where they kind of progress from like these kind of goofy kids things till you get to the 90s trilogy where it's like super dark and like, you know, affecting, where people, you know, were all the world was like becoming a more dangerous place, and so these films become more dangerous and serious. So I know it's like a weird tangent, sorry, but I always think about that when I think of Godzilla.
no. That's a brilliant tangent. Not even a tangent. That's a great topic because you hit the nail on the head. And I agree 100%. So environment concerns, when we see this, for example, if we're talking about Godzilla films, I think Hedorah, Godzilla versus Hedorah, and sometimes, right. So the environment is smack dab right at the center of that film, and which is also, I think, it's a very violent film actually.
Yes.
Hedra, there's a lot of monster on monster violent action. So there's that's actually quite a revolutionary film in the Godzilla series. And also you mentioned themes that are social themes, and so another film that I don't think gets a lot of love, relatively speaking, is like All Monsters Attack. And with there's a theme with the boy and being alone and the household,
Yeah.
and these address certain social issues. And while they
Hmm.
might not necessarily be front and center, they're certainly there. So you're absolutely right to bring those up. I agree with you about that. And then also, yes, the Alejandro Jodorowsky set. Well done for bringing that up. I think that is a set to be celebrated, and the like. Are there any works in particular in that set that you find in particular striking to you?
Well, my two favorite films are El Topo and The Holy Mountain. Uh, El Topo is just this interesting. It's such a dark work, but it's also joyful towards the end. It's like this. I just like. I feel like, and if you look in El Topo, it kind of like basically kickstarted midnight movies. That whole entire concept of like interesting films playing at midnight, and it was cool to go see El Topo. Like every Hollywood star at the time was like, man, El Topo, like they were super into it. It kind of kickstarted that whole entire underground movement of films playing in cinemas and grindhouse and that kind of thing. But The Holy Mountain is it's just a majestic piece of psychedelic cinema, like of you that hasn't been made really equal since, in my opinion. Like, it's just, they gave this madman like $1 million. They gave like this guy $1 million, and he was like building robot penises with it and stuff. Like, he was like, I don't care, I got $1 million. But you would never see somebody get stuff like that and be able to make that kind of thing anymore, And it was because of El Topo that he got that money. He'll even tell you, he says, El Topo, everybody liked this, so they just gave me $1 million. So I had like lizards and hats and stuff, like whatever. I know Jodorowsky's he's a little problematic person, but he's interesting in that he critiques the cinema machine. And we were discussing it earlier, how, sometimes they make movies just to make money. He's very critical of that, the machine that creates films, and how it can stifle creativity, because you have a director, and we've heard many times directors trying to make films and the studio won't let them do things, or they'll cut their films and stuff. And he talks about how, like, if movies are made only to make money, then you can't explore certain ideas because they're unpleasant, and those kinds of things don't make money, right? So he came under fire a little bit recently, talking about the new Dune that's coming out, and he watched the trailer and he was like, oh, it looks good, but it looks bland, because he's Jodorowsky, and that's how he says stuff like that, and everybody got in a tiff about it. But I mean, I'm not saying Dune looks bad, because it looks fabulous. I'm going to see Dune right when it comes out, right? But he's right in that the studios won't let some people make things the way they want to make them. He's not wrong.
This is so great, and I said we were winding down, but I have to ask you this, which you bring up really. This has always been something that I've too been wondering about, which is, so what is your take about that? Which is, I mean, you've mentioned about the idea of creativity and the importance of creativity, and I agree with you. And we've also mentioned the potential stifling nature of overly commercialized cinema for the sake of the profit motive 100%, which is also, I think we can agree, is not a good thing when we're coming to the status of art in the long term. Okay, but could there be something to be said? And please disagree with me. And I'm not even stating an opinion as much as really thinking out loud, and maybe I might disagree with what I'm about to say, but is there something to be said about the idea of boundless creativity needing some kind of controlling mechanism, and perhaps that controlling mechanism can be successfully supplied, let's put it that way, by the commercial motive that we see in commercial cinema. Do you see the possibility of a balance between those two forces, or do you see?
For sure.
Oh, yes, please, yes.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think there has to be some kind of like checks and balances, I guess you could say, where, I mean, especially because, you know, a movie isn't just a director. It's like a lot of people, right? And their inputs. I mean, a director gets most of the credit, but, you know, usually they have a guy that does the editing, a guy that does the music, a guy that's the cinematographer. So it's like all these inputs that are getting funneled into a single thing by the director. So it's good. I feel like it's probably good to have some kind of boundaries set, because you get stuff like The Holy Mountain, which is, it's a good movie. It's fabulous, but it's almost incomprehensible to watch. It's all over the place. It's ridiculous at times. It's sublime at other times. It has all these highs and lows, which might, if somebody was actually like, you know, holding the money above his head and you can only spend it on certain things, maybe it might have been a different type of film. It could have been better, maybe. I don't know. You know, it could possibly be worse. But, you know, there's probably definitely a balance that has to be achieved between commercialism and art. And, you know, and a good example of a movie that's both is Parasite. You know, Parasite is an absolute masterpiece of a film, in my opinion, but it's also commercially viable. I mean, it's popular. Pretty much everybody that watched it liked it, won Oscars. It's Criterion picked it up. It's doing good money. I mean, and that's a movie that, I mean, it's about capitalism too, ironically, but you know, it skirts that line where it's viable, it's slick, it's well made, well produced. It appeals to a lot of different types of people, but it's also a work of art, and it's a masterpiece, and it's a singular vision from one director. So I feel like that can work.
Yeah, that's a really excellent. Those are excellent points that you raise. And as you're speaking, and as I was listening, I immediately thought that I mentioned the word sort of commercial profit motive mechanism, and I think we have to also keep in mind, and please disagree with me if you feel that way, but we also have to keep in mind that there are many different types of this kind of mechanism as applied depending on the industry, depending on the place. For example, the Hollywood system now, I think, again, I'm speaking as an outsider, but in Hollywood system, my understanding is applied in a way that's, say, different from maybe the film industry, maybe here in Japan, for example. And even within the Hollywood structure, I think it depends on the studio, it depends on the executive, I suppose, and there are different ways in which that could be applied, maybe to the benefit of the film, maybe to the detriment of the film.
Mm-hmm.
But you bring up Parasite, which is, I think, a fascinating example of this. I was so I was so struck by its real its broad appeal, and it seemed to come at a real precise moment. Like history and art seemed to coincide magnificently, and it couldn't have come at a better time. I thought it was
Yeah.
so timely and such a great work as well. Of course. Um, oh my goodness, I can't wait until that arrives on Criterion.
Yeah.
That's something else. Oh, so Michelle, thank you so much for those insightful comments, and your perspective and insights are truly valuable to me and to many people. And so I want to thank you for everything that you've shared with us. And here is also hoping that I might be able to hear more of your great commentary in the future. So let's do this again. Please come back if that's okay with you.
Oh, I will totally come back, and I appreciate you having me on too. I
Uh,
hope your fan base doesn't get mad because we talked about video games for
oh
so long.
no. I mean, I've spoken. I mean, I think it's wonderful. And you talked about, for instance, you mentioned Death Stranding, and you mentioned how it has a cinematic experience, and so I I think that was great. And plus, it's about this kind of, how do we do it? Like it's a storytelling uh, medium. You know, video games are a storytelling medium, and there is an interactive approach to it, and cinema too. I mean, it's a passive activity, sure, on the one hand, but it's also a very active one, and there's an interactive nature to it that I think is akin to, perhaps, maybe I'm speaking as a complete novice here, but I do see a lot of strong parallels between them. And I think you bringing up the comments as you did, I think were brilliant. And so I don't think so. I think that was great. I certainly thought they were fantastic. So, um, but so, and before I go, I want to say, just ask you, so where can people find you online if they want to read more about your reviews, or they want to see more of your film responses or video game or media response? Where can people find you online for anyone who is interested?
Sure. If you look up Michelle Kisner on Facebook, I have a active Facebook. That's where I post most of my, when I'm watching films, everybody participates and we all discuss them and everything. So just look up Michelle Kisner with 2 L's in the Michelle on Facebook. I also have an Instagram. It's at Robot Cookie, which is a little silly, but it's just, it's hard to find a name where nobody took it already. But yeah, Robot Cookie, and that's more where I post hauls. If you're into buying physical media, I post all the physical media I buy on there, all the Blu-ray sets, the stuff I watch, books, comics, everything I'm reading and into. So that's more of like a catch-all area. And if you go to themoviesleuth.com, it's actually spoilerfreemoviesleuth.com. That's where all my reviews are published, as well as other people's reviews too. We cover all kinds of films on there as well, spoiler free. So that's if you worry about those.
Oh, that's wonderful, my friend. And I will also be sure to include all of this information in the description box of this video, which will be on YouTube. So for anyone who is interested in catching up with Michelle and her excellent work, please feel free to check out the description box below. There should be links there. I will do my best to provide those. And we'll go from there. So please check those out. They are really a great time. And so, and they are a true reflection of Michelle and who she is as an individual and as a great film enthusiast, media enthusiast, and a beautiful human being. So, Michelle Kisner, thank you so much. My dear friend, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And we'll do this again very soon.
I hope so.
I hope so too, my friend. Anyway, thank you again and cheers. Thank you.
Thank you.